And welcome back. Today's lesson, we are going to be talking about multiplying and dividing fractions. This is lesson 4 out of your textbook. I will have copies of these pages available for you to view online, both in email and then later on in our Canvas platform once we are able to get that live here at school. Please go ahead and get out your math notebooks. You'll also need a highlighter today, and a pencil is always preferred, so please go ahead and get that out. And let's get this started. So once again, today is lesson 4. Our topic is multiplying and dividing fractions. Okay, now here's the really cool thing. When we are dividing fractions, we actually are multiplying them, but there's one step that separates out us just simply multiplying fractions from us dividing fractions, and we're going to talk about that today. Now, as always, we always begin class with an essential question. Remember, this is what you should be able to answer by the end of class, and that is, how can I remember to multiply and divide fractions? I'll give you a moment to write this down. Please pause this video at any point in time that you may need to. Okay, and here we go. When we talk about multiplying fractions, we have 3 particular steps. And I like to call these steps because they really help us as we review this. And, if it's something that you're learning for the first time as well, it also tends to be really helpful for us to have different steps. Now, once again, our first step is going to be that we are going to multiply our numerators. Now, remember, numerators are the top part of our fraction. They're the numbers that are in the top of it. So I'm going to make a note of that here as well. Okay, so remember, when we've got a fraction, we've got our numerator up top, we have our denominator down below. So when we have fractions, we're just going to go ahead and multiply the numerators. Our second step is we're going to go ahead and multiply the denominators. Now remember, I like writing denoms for short. This way, I don't have as much stuff to write, and it kind of helps. Okay, so again, my steps are to multiply the numerators for step 1. And step 2 is to multiply the denoms or the denominator. Now my third step in this is to simplify if possible. We always want to make sure that any fraction that we have is always written in its simplest form. So we need to make sure that we always check to see if it actually can be simplified. And if it can, because they won't always be able to, go ahead and simplify it. Now, once again, if you need to pause this video at any point in time so you can get these notes written down, please go ahead and do that. And let's go ahead and get out our handy-dandy highlighters. I'm using pink, but you can go ahead and use any color that you like. And I'm going to go ahead and highlight steps, and I'm going to go ahead and highlight my 3 steps when I'm multiplying fractions. And here, I'm going to go ahead and circle the word multiplying, because that's a pretty important piece here. You could also, if you would prefer, go ahead and underline the word multiplying. Okay? Because once again, these are our 3 steps when we are multiplying our fractions. Now I do have 2 practice problems for us to do, and we're going to go ahead and do those together. Now our first practice problem is 2/5 times 4/7. Now, according to my steps, I'm going to go ahead and multiply the numerators. So I'm going to go 2 times 4, and that's going to give me 8. And on the bottom, I'm going to multiply my denominators. That's 5 times 7. And that's going to give me 35. Now I'm going to check to see, for step 3, if I can simplify my fraction 8/35. Well, 8 is 1, 8, 2, and 4. 35 is 1, 5, 7, and 35. No, they don't have anything in common. So our answer is going to be 8/35, and we're going to circle it. Next, we have 1/3 times 7/9. Once again, we're going to go ahead and multiply the numerators, and we're going to multiply the denominators, and then we're going to simplify. So I'm going to go 1 times 7 over 3 times 9. 1 times 7 is 7. 3 times 9, well, that's 27. 7's a prime number, so only 1 and 7 can go into it. Can 7 go into 27? No, it can't. So therefore, 7/27 is our final answer. Now, typically, multiplying fractions is something that people find very, very easy. Okay? The big piece here is when we need to simplify it. And when we get to our next set of problems, when we take a look at dividing fractions, we will be doing some simplifying there. All right, and here we go. Next, when we talk about dividing fractions, we have a couple extra steps, and it's because of one key piece. We need to make sure that when we are dividing fractions, we are going to KFC, okay? We are going to keep the first fraction. And what I mean by that is we are going to keep the first fraction the same. We're not going to do anything to it. We're just going to leave it as it is, okay? Kind of like their crispy chicken, you don't really want to mess with the original, okay? 2, we're going to change the sign to multiplication, okay? So again, we're going to change the sign of our problem to multiplication. So we're going to change the division sign to multiplication. I should have put that note in there. Sorry about that. So instead of it being division, we are going to go ahead and change it to multiplication. And then our third step is we are going to flip the second fraction. Okay? Turns out it's more like KCF, but I like saying KFC. All right? So we're going to flip the second fraction. So when we're working on our dividing fractions, we want to remember to keep, change, and flip. Some of you may have heard this from another teacher called skip, flip, multiply. Okay, that same process is here. We're going to keep, change, flip. Now, once we've done that, we can go ahead and multiply the new problem, which means now we can go ahead and multiply these new fractions. Now, before I go ahead and begin flipping my page to go over our fifth step, I'm going to take out my highlighter, I'm going to underline dividing, and I'm going to go ahead and, for me, highlight the remember to keep, flip, and change. You can highlight these parts as well as we go through this. Now, what do you think that fifth step is going to be? If you said that that fifth step was going to be simplifying, you were correct. Because we always, once again, want to make sure that any fraction answer that we have is in its simplest form. So again, we're going to simplify, and this is big if possible. Once again, we're not always going to be able to simplify, but we really want to try and do so if we can. All right, now let's go ahead and get going on those equations. All right, so here we have our first two practice problems of the day, and that happens to be 2/5 divided by 4/7. Now, once again, our first piece of this is we're going to keep the first fraction. We're not going to change it. So I'm going to rewrite that right there. Next, I'm going to change my sign to multiplication. So now, instead of a division symbol, I have a multiplication symbol. And again, we really like to use those dots or parentheses to indicate multiplication. We don't really like using those X's, but if you absolutely need to use an X right now, you can. And then the last piece is that we're going to flip that second fraction. So instead of 4/7, I'm now going to have 7/4. So I'm going to write 7/4 right here. Now, we get to go through and multiply out this new problem. So now here, I'm going to have 2 times 7, which gives me 14, and I'm going to have 5 times 4, which is going to give me 20. Now, is there a number that can go into both 14 and 20? You got it, 2. So now I'm going to simplify each one of these by dividing each by 2. And when I do that, I get 7/10. So my final answer is 7/10. Now what I'd like you to do is pause this video, and I'd like you to give that second example another shot. Okay? Now, for our second example, the problem is 1/3 divided by 7/9. Go ahead and pause here and give this your own attempt. All right, so here we go. So once again, we're going to keep our first fraction the same, so that's going to stay as 1/3. We're going to change the division sign to multiplication, and I'm going to flip my second fraction, so that's going to become 9/7 now. Now we get to multiply across, giving us 9/21. Now once again, we need to always check to see if we can simplify. And here, there is one common number that both 9 and 21 have in common, and that happens to be 3. So I'm going to divide each one of these by 3, and when I do that, 9 divided by 3 is going to give me 3, and 21 divided by 3 is going to give me 7. So my final answer is 3/7. Now at this time, if you need to pause this video, rewatch any of it, please go ahead and do that, because I'm going to go ahead and introduce your assignment for this lesson. Okay? Here we go. Now keep those notes out, because they are going to be very helpful to you as we continue working on this. This is a part of the focus note-taking process where we apply our learning. Okay, so we're going to apply our note learning to our assignment. Here we go. Please make sure that on this, I know that I'm going to be writing on this. You guys have this in a digital format, so please make sure that you type your first and last name in here. Please put the date and the class period. I'm going to write mine on here just for consistency. Today's date, this is for class period 7, and today's date is the 22nd. Okay. All right, now for this, okay, or actually, sorry, the date in which you guys will be doing this assignment will be the 24th. There we go, the 24th. All right, so taking a look at this, in our first section of problems for numbers 1 through 8, everything is a multiplication problem, because it says find each product up here in bold. And we don't see that again until we flip our page on the back. So that's your clue as to what mathematical property you'll be using. And again, we have the word product for multiplying. And we have the math word of quotient for division. Okay? So keeping that in mind, let's get started with our work. Taking a look at number 1, well, that one's fairly simple. I'm going to go 1 times 1, which is 1. And I'm going to go 3 times 4, which is 12. Can I simplify 1/12? No. So I'm going to go ahead and circle my answer. Next up is number 2. Here we go. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply across just like we've been doing. I'm going to get 2 times 1, which is 2, 5 times 4, which is 20. Can I simplify that? Yeah, the number 2 can go into both 2 and 20. So 2 divided by 2 is going to give me 1, and 20 divided by 2 is going to give me 10. So my final answer is 1/10. Now I'm going to go ahead and do one of the word problems down below, number 7. Number 7 says Quinn is baking bread. The recipe calls for 3/4 cup of shortening. So I'm going to highlight that, or in this case, underline. If he wants to make a half batch of bread, how much shortening would he need? Well, let's take a look. We know that we have the fraction of 3/4, and it's the first number that we see, so it's going to be the first number in our problem. And he wants to make a half batch. What does half look like as a fraction? It's 1/2. You got it. So we're going to fill that in. And here, once again, this was a multiplication problem, so I'm now going to times it. Now, I'm going to go ahead and multiply across. So that's going to give me 3 over 8. Now, because this is a word problem, you must include words in your answer. So we are going to state Quinn needs 3/8 cup of shortening. And that would be our final answer. Now, if you were doing this on paper, you would go ahead and highlight and box your answers just to make sure that you point everything out, okay? All right, now I'm going to go ahead and flip this, and I'm going to move on to the back. Now, here is where things get a little bit more difficult because we have those 2 extra steps of keep, change, and flip, okay? Now, here, everything says quotient. Quotient is the answer to a division problem. So let's go ahead and work on our division. Remember, you always also need to answer your questions in simplest form. So keep that in mind. So here we go. So for number 9, it says 3/5 divided by 1/5. I'm going to keep the first fraction the same. I'm going to change my sign to multiplication. And now I'm going to flip my fraction. So 1/5 becomes 5 over 1. Now we're going to go ahead and multiply across. So we get 3 times 5, which is 15, over 5 times 1, which is 5. Now let's go ahead and divide here. Because what we have is 15 over 5, and that over bar can also mean division. So here, 15 divided by 5, well, that's going to give us 3. So our final answer is 3. Now, let's go ahead and do a problem like, let's go ahead and do number 11, okay? For number 11, I've got 3/4 divided by 1/3. So once again, I'm going to keep the first fraction the same. I'm going to change my sign. And now instead of 1/3, I'm going to have 3/4, 3 over 1. My apologies there. Now we're going to multiply across. 3 times 3 is 9. 4 over 1 is 4. Now you've gone through and learned how to convert mixed numbers to improper fractions and improper fractions into mixed numbers. So you can go ahead and convert your fraction of 9/4 into a mixed fraction. So now here, 4 can go into 9 2 whole times. When I do that, I go 4 times 2, and that's used up 8 of my parts. So that's going to mean I've got 1 part remaining. So our 2 answers that we could possibly have are 9/4 or 2 1/4. Okay. Now, taking again a look at number 15, this is our other word problem. Many of you are scared of word problems. Don't worry, you won't be by the end of this year. Okay. Now, when we take a look at this, it says Daniel bought 15/16 pounds of cat food for his kittens. He predicts a serving of cat food is 1/8 of a pound. How many servings of cat food did Daniel buy? Well, let's take a look. So Daniel bought 15/16 pounds of cat food. So I'm going to write that down. And he predicts that each serving is 1/8 cup. So I'm going to divide this by 1/8. An eighth of a pound. And our task is to find how many servings Daniel bought. Let's get started. So now we're going to go and keep our first fraction the same. We're going to change our division sign to multiplication, and my 1/8 is going to become 8 over 1. Now I'm going to go ahead and multiply. I'm going to go 15 times 8, and 15 times 8, I can do the work over here on the side. 8 times 5 is 40, so I'm going to bring down the 0, carry the 4, and 8 times 1 is 8, plus 4 is going to give me 12. So I get 120. So now that gives me 120 over 16. What I now need to do is simplify. So, is there a number that can go into both 120 and 16? Yeah, the number 2 can. So let's go ahead and simplify by 2. So 120 divided by 2 is going to give us 60, and 16 divided by 2 is going to give us 8. Is there a number that can go into this again? Yeah, another 2. So I'm going to divide each one of these by 2 again, and that's going to give me 30, and then I'm going to get 4. Now I've ran out of room, so I'm going to go ahead and continue this down here. So I have 30 over 4. Is there a number that can go into this again? 2. You got it. So I get 15 over 2. Can I simplify this any further? You're right, I can't. But what I can do now is I can convert this into a mixed number. How many times can 2 go into 15? It can go in 7 times. Now 2 is going to stay as my remainder. And if I've used 2, and if I've done 7 whole servings, well, 7 times 2 is 14. That means I'm only going to have 1 part remaining. So that means that Daniel purchased 7.5 servings of cat food. So now we need to write that as a problem. So we're going to say Daniel bought 7.5 servings of cat food. There we go. Once again, we're going to go ahead. We are going to circle or square our answer. If you're doing this on paper, you can go ahead and do that. If you're doing this digitally, you can do that as well. And that's it for today. Now in this, you guys can go ahead and send me your assignment by doing the work in your notebook and sending me an email of it by taking a picture of it. You can do the work in your notebook, send me a picture, but you can text it to me in the number that I've given you guys. You can also send it to me in Remind. Many of your parents are a member of Remind. Just make sure that you get both sides if it's on more than one page. Or you can go ahead and do the work in an email. I will leave that up to you, okay? You can also do the work in a document. You guys are going to need to figure out, with all of this new technology that you have, what is going to be the best way for you to turn in assignments at this time, all right? Now, this assignment is going to be due by the end of class on Thursday the 24th. So if you don't finish it, I am expecting you to work on it during tutorial. If you have any questions at all, please let me know. I will have a Zoom meeting open and available for you to ask those questions. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you later.